The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
And now, it's time for Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on 103.9 LI News Radio.
Welcome, everybody. It must be Saturday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m., or it might be Wednesday night from 9 to 10 p.m. We're on twice a week to talk about your career, talk about how to find a job, how to be successful in business, how to help your small business. We just did a segment last week with the Small Business Development Center that was very, received a tremendous amount of attention when I posted it on LinkedIn. Today we're going to talk about networking, but not just with anyone. We have one of Long Island's premier networking professionals who actually made a business out of it. And I've admired her for many, many years since I went to one of her sessions. Her name is Ellen Volpe. She's the founder of American Business Associates, ABA, the longest running professionally managed business networking organization in the New York metropolitan area. She's dedicated to working with entrepreneurs, business owners, and sales executives to help them create successful, profitable businesses and close more sales. She's celebrating over 35 years in business. Ellen is a member of the Long Island Business Hall of Fame. Ellen, welcome to Radio Jobline.
Good to see you, Scott.
It's been a long time. Now, you were on way back on my TV show, right?
Way back
in the 60s, right? And I've been on doing the radio show for about 8 or 9 years. You haven't been on the radio show.
I have not.
So
it's a privilege.
You've been remiss. But we connected on LinkedIn, as I do with everybody else. Mm-hmm. And it's great to see you again. And I went to one of your sessions. Mm-hmm. I think as a guest. I think you just invited. I don't remember, signing any deals or anything, but I remember going. Mm-hmm. And I was touched because I was looking for a job myself. And I was looking for someone with a connection at Stony Brook University, where I actually did get the job and met somebody in one of your groups. I said, oh, I know her. Oh, wait a minute. No, it was United Way. Sorry. It was United Way. And Teresa Regnanti. And somebody knew her right there in the group, mm-hmm. and put in a good word for me, and I got an interview, and I wound up being the VP of marketing, and it was a great experience. So that's just a microcosm of the many thousands and thousands of people you had, and concepts you've had, and ideas you've had. Mm-hmm. But before we do too much more, tell me about your organization, and then we're going to talk about sort of the history of networking.
Sure. Well, this is our 37th year, mm-hmm. And I constantly sort of joke around, basically saying that after 37 years, I do have a group that is that old, and I like to say longer than most marriages last.
True.
And people that are committed to each other, to the concept of networking, who grew up with it, mm-hmm. Because as we know, things have changed. And we have 16 groups, each one operating independently. And our focus really is on the frequency of the relationships that we are developing, and that we have developed lifelong. There's a saying at ABA that you can check out, but you can never leave. And
Hotel California.
Yes,
right.
And the reason for that is things do change. We all recognize that. Although I've been doing what I'm doing, and you've been doing what you're doing for quite some time, mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement, and it's really very heartwarming to see when people do leave, whether they're retiring or moving to another state or changing a position, that those relationships stay with people.
Yeah. Well, look at us, for example. Exactly. I met you once at that session, and all these years, wasn't that more than 20 years ago? Or
at least.
25 years ago.
At least.
So somehow it imprinted on me, and when I saw your name on LinkedIn, I said, I know her.
Yeah.
And then we got to talking, and that's how you wound up on the show today.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So networking has really changed. Mm-hmm. And although I just went to my first networking event in about 15 years, it was the trade show at HIA.
Right.
I've only been to it 2 or 3 times over all these thousands of years, but this was going to be my last one. I decided to go. My boss talked me into it. I said, okay, we'll go. We didn't dress up. We sort of wore our Executive Alliance shirts, so that's changed because you used to dress to the nines to go to these things.
Absolutely.
And but it was different. People weren't handing out so much stuff unless you went to their booth. And it just seemed like it was different, than what it has. So let's go back to what networking was. I also worked for the LIA.
Right.
For from 2001 to 2006, a networking organization, if there ever was one. Yeah. We had great events. We had all these smaller events. And I always got nervous. I didn't like all the people coming over to me because I was on TV at the time. So people would come into me constantly. I'd be trying to eat a piece of watermelon, right? And a guy would come over and interrupt that, and I never did finish the watermelon. So I was sort of a target at a lot of these networking events. And then once I got off TV and more on radio, people ignored me, which was fine, because I would rather be one of the people, not this person who everyone wants to talk to.
Yeah.
So whether you're shy or outgoing, we have great communication skills or weak communication skills. It impacts a lot how you do at these networking events. And people like my wife are still afraid of them. She would never go to a networking event. Oh my God, never.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
So people fear it, But let's talk about where it's been. Tell me what you remember about what networking is and why it's so important and how it's changed.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I started in 1988, and I think there were 1 or 2 groups. And for the most part, people didn't really understand why they should become part of a small, let's call it non-competitive environment where people just shared ideas and information and things that were important about the business that they were in, et cetera, et cetera. Back in the day, I was spending a lot of time really educating people as to why it was important. Sort of the very basic knowledge. Today, people really don't need that basic knowledge. They know they should be networking. The issue that I think, the great thing about the past is that those relationships are still intact, and people did appreciate understanding, just like your example of your wife, why it was good for them. And believe me, most people had sweaty armpits. They were nervous. I don't see that too much today, but back then, even a 30-second commercial, which frankly I believe is dead, even a 30-second commercial was really hard for people.
Right.
And so the skills that were necessary back then were very important, because personally and professionally people were able to grow because they had an environment that actually put their arms around them and allowed them to try things and to stutter and to whatever it was that they needed to do in order to get that muscle up.
Right.
Today, I don't notice that so much because the networking is so ubiquitous. The issue that I see post-COVID, because before COVID, we were meeting in person. COVID happened, and we pivoted to Zoom. And it's really hard today to actually let go of the technology because it's so convenient. It's very time consuming. If a person is coming from Riverhead to go to Melville, it's basically half a day. And we don't have that time, the luxury of it, as we used to. We used to slow down. We used to like to go to get a coffee, but we're not doing that anymore. It just takes too much time. During COVID, we grew. We actually started groups that were never together because it was the only thing. And as we're post-COVID, there are people that still yearn for those in-person meetings, But honestly, when they get scheduled, only half the people show up.
Yeah.
And if you do, and you're lucky enough to have the technology to do a hybrid, most people are not comfortable with it. They sort of lose focus. Who am I supposed to have attention to? You in the room or you on the screen? And so the hybrid is not so good. The other thing that's very notable are the number of groups. And this idea of creating frequency with a small group of people as opposed to a very wide brush of, again, more business cards or more bumps on your phone is also something that I see as very problematic, because less is more in my world. I see it all the time. And what I notice is that people are not prepared when they are networking to be anything other than their business category. They don't know how to articulate their value in 40 seconds, because that's about all we have. And they're not able to answer the question, who are you looking to meet, with something other than the psychodemographics of a particular category. And I find that problematic, because when I ask people in my group to be specific, I had a personal injury lawyer say, I'm going to be specific. It's not really for me, but I don't think you can help me. And he asked for a pediatric neurologist, and 2 people in the room were able to provide a connection for him. And so that specificity is something that if you're not paying attention to, and you're off and running from pillar to post, from group to group, you may find that nobody even asks you that. Yeah,
I mean, Ellen, I think I asked anybody that. I mean, I'm just going back to my recent one that I went to in May, and I don't think I asked one person who they would like to meet, or I'm not sure that people know what the script is. You know, we all go to these things and we just kind of bounce. So like, I'll see you and oh, Ellen, great to see you. We haven't seen each other in a long time. Or if you're somebody new and you've come over to my booth, or you met me just on the rotunda, I would just talk to you, but not so strategically, more haphazardly.
So you have to understand the environment that you're in. Because you're absolutely right. At a trade show, unless you bump into somebody that you happen to frequently see in a group, and you bring something specific up, it's very different than walking a trade show and having a conversation. And, you know, my experience at the trade show is that I walked just like you did. I walked the show. I met people. I looked at them in the eyes. I asked them about their business. They gave me their card. They asked me to reach out to them. I don't really understand, because I connected with them on LinkedIn. I sent them an email. And all I have to say is that the fortunes are in the follow-up, because none of them followed up.
Interesting.
And so from a networking standpoint, walking the floor at a trade show is very different than being in a small environment with 15 or 20 or 25 people that you see twice a month, that you're not selling, but that you're learning their value, what they're working on now, what's changed in their business. Because, you know, it's easy to see that on a daily basis, there are things that are happening that are impacting business. Markham just got sold. That's a the impact for their employees and for the company that bought them and the people that are doing business with them. And so the market intelligence that you would get out of being in a small group where there's conversation about the things that are taking place in business makes you very smart. It gives you the market intelligence that we in the old days used to call general leads. And so I just think that the concept of networking is very diluted.
Well, let's talk about how you should do it. So we'll get back to how you do it in your small groups and the benefits of all that. But a lot of us don't belong to those things. So for those of us that walk into a trade show or any sort of networking event, large or small, what should we be doing? Because I think what we're doing is just going with the flow. So you'll meet someone and you'll say, well, she seems like a nice woman. Let me talk to her a little bit longer. And, you kind of budget your time with who you think can benefit you, perhaps. But strategically speaking, what should we be doing? When do we start our 40-second pitch? How do we begin? How do we start?
So, again, knowing the environment that you're in, and my experience of walking the show and spending 4 or 5 hours by the time I got there, by the time I walked there, by the time I had the conversations and I left, honestly, that was a very unfulfilling experience for me.
Me too.
And I would rather be in a small environment with 4 or 5 people that I know, having coffee with them and learning about what they're doing now and how we might be able to help each other. I find that just, immeasurably more effective than going out to some environment that doesn't support these conversations. And how to be in those conversations really is taking an interest in other people and what they do, and taking the pressure off of you to say, what your 30-second commercial is going to be. Nobody wants to hear it. So, being interested in other people and finding out about them gives you an opportunity to say, let me tell you a little bit about me. This is what I'm looking to accomplish. Perhaps we could help each other.
Yeah.
But the idea of just showing up and sharing a card or doing a bump, having the technology help you, is not enough. Because the fortunes are in the follow-up. Without that, there's nothing. I have those cards on my desk right now. I've forgotten what the people look like.
Yeah, and I used to have piles.
And I wrote notes on the back of them so that when I did connect with them, I could either introduce them to somebody or do something that would benefit them. They lost my attention.
Yeah, for many years when I went to these things, it would be all about careers. So people would say, oh, I saw your TV show and I liked the one about nurses. I thought about becoming and next thing you know, I'm talking about nurses and healthcare. But I never got a chance to do my own commercial because I was busy fielding questions that were coming from other people. So it's different for me because I'm just an unusual person. It happened to be my face was all over News 12 at the time. Right. So but if that wasn't the case, I would have been more strategic about my networking and tried to have a greater benefit, bang for my buck. If I'm going to get up and put a suit on and go to an event, I want to try to meet somebody that's going to help me make some money. So
Adam Grant wrote a book called Give and Take. And basically, givers like to give. And I like to say that, we're making up for something because we can't help ourselves to help other people. And those people who do that, if they're not prepared themselves, if they don't know who their prospects are, if they're not ready to say, do you know somebody at Altis? I'd like to meet Altis. If they're not prepared for that, then they burn out. And they're the ones that are saying that networking doesn't work. It doesn't work because they're not in the right environment and they're not prepared when they are in those environments to really focus in on what they need so that there's a give and take. So
the most powerful thing that's happened in networking, I would say, since you and I met, is LinkedIn.
Right.
Because LinkedIn sort of makes it a little bit easier. Not that easy is better, but if you want to meet somebody, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn and they're in the same field you're trying to get information on. Now this is what's happening on LinkedIn. It's happened to you, I'm sure. People are selling you.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the case the first 5 or 6 years. No one ever sold me anything. Now there's all these programs available and all these salespeople that will sell you this system where they're reaching out to people on LinkedIn for you, or you're doing it yourself. So
I had the experience of doing that. The investment that I made was a big fat zero. Why? Because when you get them and I get them, we don't even look at them.
No.
I use LinkedIn to research the connection. I look at it's like a resume. I look at who they know. I look at who's responding to their posts because those people know them. And I'm using it to navigate and not to sell and not to, try and bombard people.
Yeah.
The money that I spent was a complete waste.
Yeah.
And do it yourself or don't do it.
Yeah.
Because those systems are very smart, and they, in most cases, I can't say that it worked for me.
So when someone tries to connect with me, the first thing I do is I look at their job title. And if it's an account executive, forget it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. And some of them even disguise that they're account executives with a founder or something.
Right.
So anything but I'm trying to sell you something, and then they get you on the phone and they try to sell you something. Now, we'll talk about how all this impacts the job hunt,
Yes.
which networking is still the most powerful thing. And I'll give you a statistic at the beginning of the next segment from all the years that I gave my little workshops on how to find a job. And we'll talk about networking. You're listening to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor. I have with me the queen of networking, Ellen Volpe from the American Business Associates, ABA, the longest running professionally managed business-to-business networking organization in the New York metropolitan area. If you want to be on Radio Jobline, write to me, Scott P. 118@gmail.com. You can be on the show, give me an idea for the show. And also connect with me on LinkedIn, because all of the job lines we record after they air here on the radio, we post them on LinkedIn, as we will do Ellen's show next Tuesday. So we're coming back with a lot more from Ellen Volpe. Stay with us. You listen to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor.
Roll away the dew.
And now, welcome back to Radio Jobline with your host, Scott Possessor, right here on LI News Radio.
Welcome back, everybody. Listen to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor. I have with me the queen of networking, Ellen Volpe, from the American Business Associates, the longest-running professionally managed business-to-business networking organization in the New York metropolitan area. I know Ellen. I went to one of her group meetings 1,000 years ago, although if I'm right about it being United Way, it was 2011.
All right.
So because that's when I started working there. So that makes more sense. But I thought it was longer, way back in the 1990s even. So as though the 1990s existed, which
Listen,
they don't.
I know. We're dinosaurs, though.
For real. So networking is a big part of job hunting. And I'd like to give you and the listeners some thoughts. When I started in this business, I was doing workshops at libraries, right? And I was the first guy that did that. Now lots of people do it, but I was the first guy to do it. And I'd go and it'd be 20 people. The library would promote it, and it'd be, say, 20 people would show up, and they're all job hunters and want advice and so on, and that's what we would talk about. At first, I didn't even stand up. I sat. That's how small the groups were. But then I started using a lectern, getting more professional, developing more of a script. And I would always ask the same question. How many of you in this group, say 20, found your last job through a classified post? And 2 people would raise their hands. How many of you found your job through an employment agency? 1 person would raise their hands. How many of you found a job through someone that you know? 17 people raised their hand.
Right.
And I actually wrote on the board before I did the poll the numbers that I thought would take place. And I was almost always right on the button. So what that means is answering classified posts was not a good way to find a job. Going through executive search firms was not a good way because they have to come to you or not at all. If you go to them, it's a different story. The old employment agency is a dead thing. Now it's executive search. So statistically speaking, the best way to find a job was through someone that you know. So we used to talk about how to network, your friends, your family, the people that you worked with, people you work from, former jobs, former fellow employees, all the different categories. And I'd help them with their networking and so on. Then I remember 10 years later, doing the same thing, larger audiences, 50, 60, 70 people. And I'd say, okay, 60 people. How many people found your last job through a classified ad? 6. How many people found your last job through a search firm? 3. right? So the 51 of them found a job through someone that they know. And then 10 years later, I was still doing the same thing. And the stats didn't change. And then LinkedIn came to town. And years after that, I did the same thing. Again, the stats did not change. So to this day, the likelihood of finding a job through a classified post is 20% compared to 50%, 60%, or even 70% from networking. So all of this has not changed. All the technology, all the platforms, Career Builder, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, you can go on and on and on, and people still find a job through someone they know. So that's these are facts. So this is why it's so important for job hunters to network. But now they use LinkedIn. They've gotten lazy. They don't go to the networking organizations as much as they used to. I think the attendance for those types of things is down. I even noticed the HIA one was a little bit down that we had gone to. But you know, it's critical. It's critical. So give me your thoughts on how candidates should be using networking that are in transition.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, and I'm curious because I hear people sitting in front of their computers, looking at Indeed, looking at however many there are, and not getting anywhere. And I think that most people who are searching are coming out of some type of a position within a company. And I meet people, and I have several examples of this, where people have come out of those environments, working maybe in the city, living on Long Island, and having no connection to business on Long Island, and not really knowing where to start. I find that these people also don't understand that the positions that they've held and the connections that they have because of the jobs that they did have, don't really understand that the assets in those databases of people, other people have an interest in. And we were sharing an example before that really has to do with a person, let's say, that worked in middle management in a company in the area of security. Maybe that person dealt with the distributors of products to security companies. And so that person's connections are very valuable to someone who's looking to market into those types of companies. And I find that most people don't really understand how valuable those assets are, because in that example, that person could actually reverse engineer, look for companies that really would be happy for the connections, and sort of create a position that might not even exist because of the opportunities that person has to open doors that would typically be closed.
You know, it's very interesting. I don't think I've ever advised a LinkedIn user to look at the connections of the person and say, well, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. This person knows a lot of folks in the security industry.
Right.
And am I interested in the security industry? Am I is it something that appeals to me? Maybe that person is worthwhile contacting, but with a strategy.
Right.
Because you know that they know a lot of people in that particular industry. Now, you don't have to pick one that has familiarity with security. Right. You could do it with any of the areas that you're interested in. Right. But that's another way to network, is to look at people's connections.
To me, I think it's the most powerful way, because everybody needs business today. And any company that you go to, the problems that they're having could be solved with more sales. And if that's the case, then people that are looking for new positions mostly are looking in a very linear way at what they did, what they can do now, and they don't really even examine their skill set, which is also another aspect that other people would hire for. And so I just think that the transitional issues that people are having because of having to move from one position to another are they're looking at that in a very sort of an old way. and not a new way in terms of where it is we are today, so that those assets really could be put to work, not only for them in terms of being able to bring those connections into a company, but to provide the value that they need in order to have a new position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like people that are reaching out to me on LinkedIn are looking at my connections the way you've just described and contacting me strategically for a particular reason because of who I know.
Right.
So that is something they should be doing, but they're not. But they're constantly contacting me for advice. So advice, I am the advice man, you know. So and I'm fine with that. Like you said, I'm a giver, you know, when it comes to stuff like that.
Right.
But I do believe that some of us are not gaining from networking. Those people that say it doesn't work, which of course it does work, and the stats show it works. They're not doing it right.
Right. Well, they're not looking beyond the edges again of a linear way of looking at getting a position, and it's a very powerful thing to do because there's a concept called 20-20-60. 20% of the people around you will always be helping you. All you have to do is show up, and maybe not even show up. They're bringing it right to you. 20% of the people around you, even if they know, love, and trust you, are not going to do it. And there's no particular reason for me to say why. It's just that it's not in their DNA to actually look to the sides and say, hey, Scott needs to talk to this one. 60% of the people around you can't wait to help you. And all you have to do is ask them. But the asking really sort of comes back around to what are you asking for? Who do you want to meet? And to use LinkedIn is a great example because you can look, I can look in your LinkedIn and I can go up and down all of our shared connections, and I would bet that some of them are shared, but I don't know who they are because that's what happens on LinkedIn. I'm connected to people I never met.
Right.
That doesn't mean that that you can't help me navigate to those people. Because if you know them and you haven't talked with them in a dog's age, you could reach out and say, hey, I haven't talked with you in a dog's age. What's happening now? And by the way, I have somebody that I'd like to introduce you to. She'd like to meet you because she has something that might be beneficial to you.
And this is bookmarked for 1 second because what I was trying to say earlier and didn't finish my thought was because so many people are selling you now on LinkedIn that when somebody actually approaches you for networking, you're like, yeah, I'll help you.
Right.
Because you're so glad that someone isn't looking at you as just another prospect.
Yeah.
You know, so my attitude has changed. I'm looking at the person who wants to connect with me and I'm saying, why? Why are they connected? Do they want to sell me something? If they don't, I'll connect.
Well, they may have somebody that you can help. There may be a resource that they have. See, this is the thing. Every person has their own node of network. They have their own connections. Mine are not yours. And I probably know people. We haven't been in touch. I don't know exactly what you're looking for, but hey, if we have a conversation and I can ask you some very important questions about what you're doing now and what you hope to accomplish in the next 3 months, I'm probably writing some names down because that's how my brain operates. My brain is always thinking, hey, is that good for me or is that good for someone else?
Right.
Whenever I meet a new person, all of those people that I met at HIA, I have the names of other people on the backs of those cards because I saw something for them they couldn't see for themselves.
Interesting.
The fortunes are in the follow-up, unfortunately. They didn't contact me, so they're probably going to end up in the trash.
Right, and I'm right there with you, and I can't tell you how many business cards I've eventually thrown at. Thousands. So let's talk about the nuances and the protocols where people are not getting it right, Ellen. Let's straighten them out.
Well, again, I feel like I'm beating the issue, but the issue is being prepared. Is knowing yourself, what are your goals for the next 3 months? Who do you want to meet? What categories of business would be good for you? Who are great referral sources? All of these things have to be answered in a plan, in a way in which somebody can say, okay, I know where I'm going now. I know what I'm looking for. Let's go back to the security concept. If I'm looking for security people, I'm going to go to facility managers, IFMA. I'm going to go to real estate centric organizations. Libby, I'm going to go to places where I might be able to meet those people because that's where they go. And so, again, it's important if this person in transition, using the security example, wants to meet security people because of the fact that he or she has those connections, knows those people, is influential with those people, then I want to go where I know other people would be interested in knowing who I know. Because if I help them, then maybe they can help me.
Well, one of the organizations that our industry, the staffing executive search industry, would normally be interested in would be SHRM. Right? Society of Human Resource Management, all the talent people would be in there.
Right.
But I actually went to a SHRM meeting, and this is 5 years ago, not recently. And great meeting. I mean, it was fun, lots of great people, but I remember there were more people there trying to sell to the HR focus of the company than actual HR folks. So I said, well, that's disturbing. And then I didn't go to another meeting. And that's not to say anything negative about SHRM. I admire them. They're a good organization. The people who run it are great. But I just think everybody's trying to do the same thing. So we're all going to the net, to the function to sell something.
So I think that, again, strategy counts. And if you were going there and you wanted to meet, let's just say, the human resource people from law firms, just as an example, then you would have a strategy in the room. You would look for people that were in those positions, or those people that were exhibiting that actually work with those people, and you would look to see where the commonalities could be, so that you could leave that event and reach back to a person to say, I was at the trade show, I picked up your card, we only had a few minutes to talk, I'd like to talk to you more about what you're looking to accomplish, how I might be able to help you, and how we might be able to help each other. Would you like to set an appointment? It's not about grazing and collecting. It's really there's more strategy involved because, as I said before, less is more. I think that there is this old attitude of let me get as many cards as I can and let me sell these people. But that doesn't work today because people don't have the time. And people are much more focused, even though they might not be specific enough.
Now, you did say something about people are not asking. And let's talk about that because I want to save some time for to talk about your business. So we should be asking what?
Well, again, if you're prepared, I went over that short list. If you know your ideal client, you know their psychodemographics, you know where they are, you know the position of the person you're looking to connect with, and you take that to the next level. And let's just say go to the HIA Industrial Park and do some research. And let's just say you come up with, 5 distributors. Then you have what to ask for. You have an opportunity to say, I'm looking to work with the XYZ distribution company. And perhaps you know someone, or maybe you know someone that knows someone. This is who I'm looking to meet. I said it before. I'm looking to meet the CFO at Altice. I haven't been able to find anybody that knows anybody that can introduce me.
Well, I know a guy there.
There you go.
So there you go. Networking right at work right there.
Right.
Ellen, let's just do a pause, and I want to tell people about your company.
Thanks.
Okay. So this is a microcosm of everything we've spoken today. You put it in so that people are in smaller groups, and there's only one from each industry, right? So you don't have 2 from an industry because then they're competing with each other. And then set it up and tell me what and how people can get involved.
Yeah. Well, I started in 1988, and there were no groups, or there were 2 groups, and so I I basically curated these environments. And some of them, we have one that's focused on healthcare. I was involved in a group that was all about food and hospitality. But typically, a very diverse group would come together. My oldest group has about, 35 or 40 people in it, all doing something different. The frequency is important. The every other week, they're meeting each other outside. This is not a new model. Most groups that are around now do this kind of thing. What's interesting is how they do it. Some are very transactional and otherwise, but we're always looking to meet people who are either frustrated with their networking, have never done networking, and who are looking to be connected with people that are not selling each other and who are interested in what they do, and mostly who they are as humans, because that's how we create these relationships.
And it sounds like a room full of givers, people willing to share information.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's very gratifying to watch people in action doing that. It allows them to deal with their social capital and do what they can do to help each other.
Right.
So if people want to reach me, I'm happy to share my email.
Please do.
It's Ellen at ABA Networking. A is in apple, B is in boy, A is in apple, and the word networking.com. And
is there a website?
ABAnetworking.com.
ABAnetworking.com. Okay. Just in case people are just rushing for the pencil now, quickly do that again.
Okay. ABAnetworking.com is the website.
Right.
And the email is Ellen at ABAnetworking.com.
And people can join one of these groups?
Well, they can come as a guest. We like them to come as a guest. Not everybody is invited. It really depends on whether or not they fit into the existing cultures that are there. We don't want too many giraffes when everybody is a zebra, and we want to make sure that there's connection that people can benefit by. So we look to curate that.
Okay, so all great stuff, Ellen. All great stuff. I would like you to come back on the show again too.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing.
Sure.
The people that are in transition should reach out to me.
Okay.
We love to meet people in transition. We love for them to be a guest at our meetings because we do have people who have found positions. We have some people know Beth Granger. Beth Granger was in transition when she first came to ABA, and the group knew she was going to be in her own business. So we really want to meet people in transition.
Fantastic. All right. One more time, your email address.
Ellen at ABAnetworking.com.
Okay. Fantastic job. Thanks so much for being here. We'll have you again back soon.
Great to see you.
And if you want to be on Radio Jobline and have an idea for the show, you can write to me, scottp118@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, since everyone else does, and give me your idea there, or ask me if there's someone that I can help you introduce you to. So you've been listening to Radio Jobline with Scott Possessor. My thanks to Ellen Volpe. We'll be back with another show next week. Have a great week, everybody. Happy hunting.
May the four winds blow you safely home. Roll away the dew.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.